Why is it that some people glide through life collecting allies, opportunities, and admiration without ever raising their voice? Why do others, smarter, more qualified, even better intentioned, struggle to be noticed, constantly explaining themselves, justifying their value, begging for recognition? The harsh truth is this: the world is not moved by merit, it is moved by structure. And those who understand how to shape that structure don't need to ask, they are chosen. We live in an age obsessed with self-expression. Speak your truth, be authentic, assert your boundaries. But let me ask you this: when was the last time being authentic guaranteed influence? When did saying more actually give you more control? Influence is not granted to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the person who designed the room. This is where most people fail. They think influence is about persuasion, about being convincing, charismatic, persuasive. But real influence operates long before words are spoken. It happens in the setup, not in the speech. It's not about what you say, it's about what others feel they must choose. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Not as a manipulator, but as a master strategist of human nature. He wasn't interested in theatrical power, the kind that needs to be seen and heard to be respected. He was obsessed with structural power, the kind that rearranges the environment until obedience feels voluntary. The kind of power that never knocks on the door, it builds the house and waits for others to walk in. Let me give you a hard truth. Most of your decisions aren't yours. They're the result of environments, narratives, and pressures set in motion by people you'll never meet. You think you chose. You think you decided. But the menu was curated long before you arrived. And you picked from it, like everyone else, believing you had control. That's the illusion. And Machiavelli didn't just see through it. He learned how to craft it. This video isn't about making you more persuasive. It's about making you untouchable. You'll stop chasing. You'll stop convincing. You'll stop negotiating from weakness. Instead, you'll learn to sculpt situations where others want what you want, because they think it was their idea. Where people act in your favor, not out of obligation, but out of instinct. Where you become necessary, not because of what you say, but because of the void you fill. Once you understand the psychology of invisible influence, everything changes. The way you move through conversations, the way you structure opportunities, the way you position yourself in the social ecosystem. You stop competing for attention and start engineering necessity. And it all begins with a single shift in perspective, from seeking to control people to learning how to control the context in which they make decisions. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said, "Whoever controls circumstances controls outcomes." Not with force, not with deception, but with elegance, with precision, with strategy. So, are you ready to unlearn everything you thought you knew about power? Are you ready to stop being reactive and start being the one who shapes the terrain others must walk on? Then let's begin by uncovering the invisible framework that holds the key to all influence, the principle of invisible influence. Influence is not about power, not in the way you've been taught. Power screams, influence whispers, power demands, influence designs. The most powerful figures in history were rarely the loudest. They were the ones who mastered the subtle geometry of the situation. That's what Machiavelli understood better than anyone. You don't need to control people. You only need to control the context in which they act. What does that mean in practice? It means that real influence happens before a single word is spoken. It happens when you decide who gets access, when you predict what they'll need before they know it, when you present choices that all serve your objective, no matter what they pick. This is not persuasion. This is preemption. This is invisible influence. Let's break it down into the three core pillars, what Machiavelli would have called psychological warfare by elegance. 1. Control of access. Become rare, become desired. Machiavelli knew that power dilutes in abundance. The more available you are, the less you're valued. Why? Because human psychology is wired to crave scarcity. We chase what we can't easily reach. We assign worth to what is hard to attain. So the first move in invisible influence is strategic distance. You don't make yourself available, you make yourself significant. You manage your presence like a luxury brand. Rare, desired, untouchable. And here's the secret. This isn't about arrogance, it's about perception. You create controlled access not to repel others, but to signal that proximity to you is a privilege. You become the scarce resource that others must calibrate around. And suddenly, people start adjusting their behavior. Not because you asked, but because your presence reshaped the rules. 2. Management of needs. Become the answer. Before the question exists. This is predictive influence, the ability to see 3 steps ahead, to solve problems that haven't emerged yet. You want to be the person others turn to when things break, but more than that, you want to be the person they trust to prevent the breakdown in the first place. Machiavelli warned rulers never to wait for the storm to hit. He who prepares during peace rules during chaos. This applies to you. Influence is anticipating the emotional, social, or strategic needs of those around you, before they're aware of them. And once you fulfill a hidden need, you become psychologically irreplaceable. People may not even realize why they feel drawn to you, but the answer is simple. You solved a problem they didn't know they had. 3. Architecture of choices. Control the frame. Control the outcome. The third pillar is the most deceptive and the most powerful. It's the ability to create scenarios where every option leads back to your goal. You're not forcing anyone. You're simply narrowing the field. You don't say, choose me. You say, here are your 3 options, all of which were hand-picked to benefit you. This is where Machiavelli's brilliance becomes lethal. He understood that freedom is often an illusion. Most people feel empowered when given choices, but those choices are rarely as free as they think. By controlling the structure of options, you allow others to feel in control while guiding them exactly where you want. It's strategic freedom, the appearance of agency wrapped around a predetermined outcome. Together, these 3 pillars form the architecture of invisible influence. You're not pushing, you're not chasing, you're not selling. You're creating gravitational pull, quiet, constant, irresistible. This is how the most influential people operate, not with noise, but with precision, not with force, but with design. They don't argue, they don't compete. They craft the circumstances and let others step willingly into their plans. But this is just the foundation. To truly master this power, you must learn the laws that govern it. Specific strategies, forged in political fire, tested in court intrigues, and still applicable to your workplace, your relationships, your daily decisions. In the next section, we dive deep into the 5 laws of Machiavellian influence. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Influence doesn't begin when you open your mouth. It begins the moment others realize they need you but can't reach you on demand. It begins when your presence becomes a resource. And like every scarce resource, its value increases every time you say no. Law 1. Be necessary, not available. This is the first rule of real-world influence. People chase what withdraws. The psychology is brutally simple. If you're always accessible, you're taken for granted. If you're always agreeable, your agreement becomes meaningless. If you're always around, your presence blends into the background. Machiavelli understood this deeply. Princes who were too eager to please were devoured by the very people they tried to win over. Why? Because humans instinctively equate scarcity with status. And so, the one who makes himself rare becomes a magnet. It's not about being cold, it's about being calculated. Strategic absence sharpens desire. When you control your availability, you don't diminish your influence, you amplify it. You stop reacting to invitations and start issuing them. You condition others to see your presence as an event, not a given. Think about it. When was the last time you truly valued someone who was always available? We worship the rare. We chase the distant. We bend for the inaccessible. That's not cynicism. That's psychology. So stop flooding the market with your presence. Pull back. Let people feel the absence, and watch how quickly they recalibrate their attention. Law 2. Solve problems they don't know they have. The second law is where real influence solidifies. Don't just be useful, be prophetic. Don't just react, preempt. The most powerful individuals in any environment are those who solve problems before they are recognized as problems. That's when you stop being helpful and start being indispensable. Machiavelli wrote, "Whoever prepares in peace rules in chaos." This is more than a political principle. It's a psychological law. When you anticipate a person's needs, especially the ones they can't yet articulate, you become a silent authority in their life. Not because you demanded their loyalty, but because you became the only one who truly saw them. Influence is emotional before it's logical. People remember who saved them, but they are bound to those who saved them from storms they didn't even see coming. Imagine this. You walk into a room and offer a solution no one knew they needed. At first, they're surprised, then grateful, then dependent. You didn't impose your value, you revealed it. That's power, real power, invisible, intimate, unshakable. To master this law, you must become a student of subtlety. Observe patterns, predict disruptions, offer answers in silence. Influence doesn't shout, it listens, and when the moment is right, it acts with surgical precision. Together, these two laws form the base of gravitational influence. One withdraws to increase demand. The other advances with foresight to become irreplaceable. You become the fixed point others must orbit. Not because you force them, but because, without you, they feel exposed. But influence isn't just about being needed. It's about getting others to defend your ideas, to champion your agenda as if it were their own. The next level of power is not just anticipation, but co-creation. Planting ideas in such a way that others water them, that's what we'll explore in the next section. You've already learned how influence begins, not with presence, but with scarcity. Not with persuasion, but with anticipation. Now we move into the core mechanics of social control. The ability to plant your vision inside someone else's mind, and the art of crafting options that all serve your purpose. This is where influence becomes architecture. Law 3. Make others invest in your idea. Here's a brutal truth. People don't defend what's right. They defend what they built. The fastest way to make someone commit to your idea is to let them think it was theirs all along. Machiavelli knew that the surest way to secure loyalty was not through orders, but through ownership. When someone believes they contributed to a vision, their ego fuses with its survival. They become not just followers, but guardians. And now you're not convincing them to support you, they're convincing others. You don't present your plan and ask for approval. You present a question that leads to your plan. You ask for feedback you already anticipate. You frame the idea in a way that lets others tweak the details, then sit back and watch them defend it with fire. They think they've discovered the path. In reality, you built the entire road. This is not manipulation, it's psychological aikido. You're using the natural bias of ego and investment to stabilize your influence. People trust what they feel responsible for, and they protect what they believe they created. Want to influence a team? Let them co-author your mission. Want to lead a relationship? Let them realize what you already knew. Want to drive a movement? Seed the idea and let others become the voice. Because people don't fight for borrowed ideas, they fight for their own. Law. 4. Control the alternatives. Now we arrive at one of the most subtle and lethal laws of influence, the illusion of choice. Influence doesn't come from removing freedom. It comes from designing it. You don't force people into submission. You offer them paths, all of which lead exactly where you want. Machiavelli observed that when people feel they've chosen, they rarely rebel. Even if all options were curated in advance, the sensation of autonomy disarms resistance. And this is the secret weapon of strategic minds. Control the frame, not the fight. Here's how it works. You never say, "This is what you must do." You say, "You can do A, B, or C," but behind the scenes, you engineered all three outcomes to benefit you. Whether they pick the fast route, the slow route, or the scenic route, they're still on your track. This isn't deception, it's design. It's not about limiting choice, it's about directing it. You respect their agency, but you orchestrate the architecture in which that agency operates. Parents do this with children. Leaders do this with teams. Great negotiators do this with adversaries. The amateur argues for the best idea. The strategist makes every idea a win. You're not here to dominate through force. You're here to dominate through structure. Let others feel free while you guide the flow. That's how kingdoms were built. That's how modern empires run, not through command, but through careful choreography. These two laws, investment and controlled autonomy, form the spine of internalized influence. You no longer need to push. Others pull your agenda forward for you, believing it's theirs. You don't fight for power. You become the frame through which power flows. But there's one final law that completes this system. One rule that separates the tactician from the master. It's the principle that holds the entire structure together. The one thing you must never do if you want your influence to last. In the next section, we'll reveal how the ultimate form of power is the one no one can trace. Now we reach the most dangerous level of influence, the one that cannot be seen, cannot be traced, and therefore cannot be resisted. It's not about control through power, it's about direction through absence. The most influential individuals don't appear powerful at all. They seem helpful, observant, passive even, until you realize every move you made was quietly engineered by their presence, or worse, by their absence. Law 5. Never appear to be influencing. This is the apex of psychological strategy. If people sense they're being influenced, they resist, regardless of the idea's value. Human beings crave autonomy. The moment you appear to be pushing, persuading, or guiding, defenses activate. They second-guess. They push back. Not because the idea is wrong, but because the ego wants ownership. And influence that's obvious feels invasive. Machiavelli warned against being too visible in your power. A prince must know how to disguise his intentions. Not to deceive maliciously, but to prevent panic, resistance, or rebellion. Influence is like gravity. The more invisible it is, the more complete its grip. So how do you become that invisible hand? You seed ideas in questions, not commands. You plant doubt subtly, so that people arrive at your conclusions as if through their own logic. You redirect rather than confront. You observe patterns, then gently adjust the variables so new outcomes seem inevitable. You stay in the background, not because you lack strength, but because your strength is in remaining undetected. Let me be blunt. The best influencers are often underestimated. They let others feel in control. They let the spotlight blind everyone else. They don't compete for credit. They engineer it. And that's the ultimate paradox. By surrendering the appearance of control, you gain absolute control. This is not weakness. It is elite-level strategy. Because when no one suspects you're steering the ship, no one tries to wrestle the wheel. The loud influencer must defend his position constantly. The silent strategist builds systems that self-reinforce. Think of it like this. If you're seen as the source of pressure, people push back. But if you're seen as the source of clarity, they lean in. Your job isn't to dominate the conversation. It's to define the frame where conversations happen. This is how institutions are built. This is how ideologies spread, not with slogans, but with silent architecture. Invisible hands shaping visible outcomes. And when it's done right, people will not only follow your path, they'll swear it was theirs all along. But influence, no matter how elegant, is useless if it stays theoretical. Now that you've mastered the laws, it's time to bring them into your world. Career, relationships, negotiations, social dynamics. In the next section, we dive into real-world applications. How to use these principles not just to impress, but to dominate. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Theory without execution is nothing but intellectual entertainment. Now that you understand the 5 laws of Machiavellian influence, it's time to bring them into where real power is tested. This is where architecture meets action, because strategy only becomes dominant when it's applied with precision. In the workplace, most people ask for promotions. You won't. You'll make promotions seem like the only logical choice for the system to preserve itself. How? You execute laws 1 and 2. You become necessary, not by overextending, but by becoming the irreplaceable answer to the company's hidden vulnerabilities. When others wait to be asked for solutions, you've already prevented problems. You're not loud, you're critical infrastructure. When there's a bad idea floating in a meeting, you don't attack it. You ask the right questions. You plant seeds. Then you gently redirect the discussion until someone else arrives at your vision and presents it like an epiphany. They feel brilliant, but it was your strategy all along. When others compete for attention, you control resources. You don't chase visibility. You engineer relevance. And relevance, unlike attention, makes you the axis around which decisions rotate. In relationships, forget persuasion. Forget convincing. The moment you argue, you lose status. The moment you demand, you trigger resistance. Real influence in relationships doesn't come from being heard. It comes from structuring the emotional environment so that your presence becomes the most stable force in the room. Don't beg for time. Create moments where your time is rare and therefore respected. Don't try to change someone's mind. Ask questions that slowly convince them to reconsider their own logic. Lead them back to your conclusion not with force, but with elegant framing. Solve small tensions before they ignite. Be the calm in their chaos, the certainty in their storm. Over time, you don't just become valuable, you become psychologically essential. In personal negotiations, don't walk into a deal hoping for the best. Walk in with 3 outcomes prepared, each one structured to benefit you. Present them as options. Let the other side feel empowered, but you already know, whichever they choose, you win. In conflict, don't escalate. Redefine the problem. Be the one who offers clarity when others spiral. People don't follow authority, they follow relief. When you consistently provide elegant resolutions, you rise as the unseen leader. In groups, don't fight for dominance. Connect people with complementary needs. Become the social architect, the one who isn't just liked, but relied upon. And once you are the connector, no one moves without you. And that's the final stage of influence, becoming not just a participant in the system, but the architect of it. But there's still one truth left to be revealed, one final insight that unites everything Machiavelli knew. Influence, strategy, anticipation, they all serve a higher aim, becoming indispensable. Power doesn't belong to those who command. It belongs to those who complete. The final truth Machiavelli revealed is as uncomfortable as it is liberating. People do not follow strength, authority, or titles. They follow necessity. They follow whoever solves the pain they cannot name. That is the true seat of influence, not in dominance, but in indispensability. You can be admired, feared, respected. None of it matters if you're replaceable. The moment someone else can do what you do, feel what you feel, give what you give, your influence collapses. That's why everything you've learned so far points to this. Your ultimate goal is to become essential, not liked, not followed, needed. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He watched kings fall not because they lacked armies, but because they lost relevance. He observed that when the people feel they no longer need you, they will turn against you or forget you. But if you become the architect of their stability, if your presence equals order, solutions, clarity, then you stop being a person and start being a pillar. This isn't about being everything to everyone. It's about positioning yourself so precisely, so strategically, that in your absence, systems falter. That's when real power begins, when your silence causes discomfort, when your exit creates imbalance, when people don't just want you, they depend on you. Think about your world right now. Where are you optional? Where are you easily replaced? That's your weakness. That's where your influence ends. And where must your presence be recalibrated so that your contribution becomes invisible, but essential? That's your new target. Become the one who connects what others can't. Anticipate what they never articulate. Frame the path they think they chose, and never, ever be obvious. Because when influence becomes visible, it becomes vulnerable. You're no longer trying to influence decisions. You are now influencing conditions. And when you control the conditions, you don't need to speak. The world will speak for you. So now I ask you, what's stopping you from becoming indispensable? Let me know in the comments. Which law resonated the most with your reality? Where do you see yourself applying these principles immediately? And if this message struck a chord with something deeper in you, don't just absorb it. Act on it. Subscribe, share, and most of all, continue your evolution. Because the next video is not just another lesson, it's a critical piece of this transformation. I'll see you there.